Now on Sports Day, full-on footy analysis with Daniel Hoyne. Thanks to Champion Data, the story behind the game.
And Daniel Hoyne is with us. He's ready to go. He's opened up his toolbox for Bunnings Trade, and he's got all the data ready to roll out. And I'll just hit you up with one that's on the temper text, and you can join us by giving us a text on 0433 9811 16. I've got to get these glasses checked, Kane, get some better vision. But what teams have won the possession count, Hoyne, but lost the most games over the last couple of seasons? Just give us that one off the top.
Yeah. Hello, G, and hello, Kane. Pleasure to be here on a Tuesday again. Yeah, good question off the text without having that with me, but it was a bit of a strange result for the Dogs on Saturday night, winning so many areas. But as always, there are reasons why you lose or win a game, and there were plenty of reasons there for the Dogs.
It's not an unusual stat, though, to have the most possessions and lose.
No, I mean, we've talked about it on this show all year how you would actually analyse the game differently if you had your time again 25 years ago, and so often you're not losing. I'm not looking at the possession count or disposal count to actually tell me if you're going to win or lose a game of footy.
Well, Kane, it's that time of the season again. Each and every month we fire up the Twitter accounts of all and sundry, in particular Hoyne, when he gives us the best cannon fodder in town. Everybody's penning their all-Australian teams as we speak, but each month, Hoyne, you give us the top 10 players in the game, starting with 10th.
Yeah, so this is based off our new rating system, which doesn't take into account where you've played. It does, but it's just looking at per 100 minutes your expectation and how far above or below expectation you've performed this season. So,
which basically smooths out the dominance of the midfielder.
Correct. So we can compare midfielder to defender to forward, ruckman to midfielders, and actually be able to compare the whole competition, which we haven't really been able to done before, if you like. So if we start at number 10, we've got Adam Sard at number 10. He's slipped a little bit over the last couple of weeks, but still finds himself in at 10th position. Nick Martin comes in at number 9, so we talked about him last week. He's having one of the best seasons we've seen by a wingman for years. Are
you surprised that most haven't put him into their All-Australian teams?
I think if people are actually taking into account genuine wingmen, well, then he should be in there. It's just whether or not those people are actually taking into account the genuine wing role, if you like, or just pushing a midfielder out onto that position. Nick Blakey comes in at number 8, so he's actually shot up the ranks over the last couple of weeks. Brent Daniels comes in at number 7, so he is flying. He was actually still the number 1 rated player on the ground at halftime before he went off the ground.
It was a shame, wasn't it?
Yeah, so he's a huge loss. Hopefully for him, he's actually only going to miss the next 3 or 4 weeks, but he's flying at the moment. Mason Wood finds himself there still at number 6, which is probably going to be a surprise to a lot of people, but given the role that he's playing as a wingman, he's outperforming the expectation of that role quite significantly. Then we've got Nick Dacos at number 5. Probably no surprise there. Jack Sinclair, number 4.
What position have you given him?
Well, this doesn't take into account, sort of what position, but we've still got him playing more minutes as a defender than he has as a midfielder this year. Same for Jack Sinclair, who's at number 4. So we've still got him playing more minutes as a defender, but he's still playing a fair bit of game time as a midfielder, but he's outperforming his expectation quite significantly. I'm going to talk about this bloke later on, but Dan Houston comes in at number 3, and I'll explain why shortly. He's flying. And then clearly the 2 best players in this rating system are Bontempelli at number 2. So he's actually slipped, from number 1 to number 2.
Why isn't he getting coaches' votes?
Well, his last couple of weeks have actually been quite, a little bit more, less impact in his game compared to what it was the first 8 weeks of the year. And then number 1 is Zach Butters, who is the number 1 rated player on our rating system.
Very interesting stuff. Where would you have Connor Rosey?
So we've got Connor Rosey at around about number 20 in the competition. So Port to have 3 top 20 players in the comp is probably a fair reason as to why they're going at what they're going. So just a couple other players as well, just if we can, just based off the last 6 weeks, who are coming with a bullet.
Yes.
So Errol Goulden is coming with a bullet. James Sicily, Shai Bolton, and just a little outside one, and he won't get a lot of love, is Harry Perryman. He's coming really hard in a role that he's playing at the moment.
All right. What does Zach Butters do that makes him the game's most damaging player right now, according to Champion Data? What stands out?
So So for him at the moment, he's got that unbelievable capacity to be able to impact the game through his ball-winning capabilities. So that's his ability to be able to win a possession in dangerous areas of the ground. And then it's his ability to be able to get outside of traffic and then use the ball so well. So he's one of those rare players at the moment that has the inside-outside game and then is able to actually complement that from a ball use perspective. So I probably don't think that's a surprise to have Zach Butters at the moment as probably the number one rated player in the competition. There might be a surprise or two, but I mean, his last 8 weeks.
I can imagine there's some
ridiculous.
Collingwood fans going, "Where's Dacos? Or did you have him?"
No, had him.
Oh,
we had him at 5.
Sorry,
had him at 5.
They might also be saying, where is Darcy Moore, who I think you basically acknowledged that he'd had a quiet first 3 weeks, but has been flying ever since.
Yeah, so he's still rated as one of the best key defenders in the competition. I think if he's not the best, I think he's the second or third best key defender in the competition. So he's flying at the moment as well.
All right, Hoyne, let's move through your 7 main talking points from the split round that was.
Yeah, and I just want to start with Carlton, given that they are a hot topic, and having a look at where they are at the moment, and you're probably thinking that finals are probably the last thing on their mind at the moment. Anyway, that's what I'm sort of thinking when you watch Carlton at the moment. But trying to analyse them and see where they sit relative to the competition at the moment. I spent a bit of time over this over the weekend, and I kept coming back, rightly or wrongly, to Melbourne of 2020. And at the halfway stage of that year. And the reason why is, for whatever reason, I can still remember Jake Lever's comments post-2021 premiership and him saying at length that success started in the second half of the 2020 season, where they changed a little bit of personnel and they changed a little bit of method and they brought in to different aspects of the game to actually launch into 2021. So I've just done a little bit of research here. So if you have a look at Melbourne at the end of round 9 in 2020 compared to where Carlton are now.
Yep.
So so Melbourne were 15th on the ladder, Carlton are 14th. The expectation on Melbourne in 2020 was that 2019 was a bad year. They were going to bounce back in 2020, make finals. They won't in that position after round 9. In terms of their age profile, their age for their selected team in round 9 2020 Melbourne was 25.2 per player. Carlton's age on the weekend was 25.2 per player, identical. You have a look at what Melbourne's issues were in 2020 at round 9, and people were talking about that they just can't score. They can't get it on the scoreboard. They were 15th for points scored and 17th for goals per inside 50. Carlton, 15th for points scored and 17th for goals per inside 50. Melbourne didn't have an issue winning contested possession. They were the 4th best contested possession team in the competition. Carlton, 4th best contested possession team in the competition right now. Melbourne's turnover game, which is what we talk about at length, ranked 15th in the competition. Their inability to be able to get that on the scoreboard.
Interrupt you, Hoyne. Just the Jordan Ngoe verdict is in. He's been banned for 3 matches, so he's going to miss matches against Melbourne, Adelaide and Gold Coast. So Collingwood were clearly able to successfully argue that down. The AFL had recommended for Jordan Ngoe to miss 3 games, which appears pretty light. It was always going to be 3 or 4. How seriously they're taking head knocks, well, we can debate that shortly, Gerard, but that's where it stands. Your initial reaction to him receiving 3 games?
I think he's lucky. Bottom line, it's. I don't think it's the time for the AFL to reduce the harshness with which they see those incidents, and so he walks away lucky. Clearly, he was remorseful, and that has played had plenty of impact. But 4, I think, would have been the appropriate sentence.
Back to you, Hoyne.
No, very yeah. So from a turnover perspective, Melbourne were 15th in the competition, and Carlton are 12th at the moment. We talk about that aspect of the game being the most important phase of the game. In terms of Melbourne's inability to be able to defend the opposition, moving the ball from one end of the ground to the other, it was below AFL average. Carlton right now, below AFL average. So Melbourne had the same issues at round 9 2020 so halfway through that 2020 season, remember that season was cut short from games played, compared to what Carlton do at the moment. Melbourne changed a few things personnel-wise. So they were able to move Adam Tomlinson from a wing to play as a key defender role. And why that was so important, that then freed up Jake Lever to become this elite interceptor, which then helped their defensive profile. What can Carlton do in that space? Melbourne were able to inject Charlie Spargo and Alex Neil-Bullen into the front half of the ground to be able to help their ability to be able to apply pressure in the forward half of the ground. Can Carlton do something similar? There was a lot of talk around Melbourne's inability, or lack of leg speed, if you like. Well, then their method and their ability to be able to change how aggressive they were with ball in hand, sort of, really put that sort of discussion to one side. So Carlton, I think for the next 10 weeks, they might not play finals, but there's been plenty of instances, and as I said, I'm using Melbourne in 2020, where you can get a lot out of the second half of a season to launch your campaign into the following year. So I don't think it should be treated as a wasted year for Carlton. I think there's a lot of examples, and as I said, Melbourne are one where you can draw back on to be able to see.
Classic mirror image, Hoyne. The challenge for Carlton is to find those midfielders or those high half forwards that are going to impact on the game, and to find that extra defender, which they've probably got, which can free up Mitch McGovern. And get Mitch McGovern back in form.
Or look for someone else. So that's what I'll be having to think of if I'm Carlton.
All right, your second point was on Jake Lever.
Yeah, so Lever's role on Friday night, I think, was significant, and this is why I'm still bullish on Melbourne. I think Melbourne's first half of the year, they've got the ability and had the ability to be able to experiment, if you like, with a few positional changes. So for the best part of 2.5 years since this halfway stage of 2020. They've gone with the three key defenders, and that being Stephen May, either Adam Tomlinson or Harrison Petty down there, and then freed up Jake Lever to be that interceptor. Well, this year they haven't actually really gone with that method too often. They've actually reverted, Jake Lever to become that second key defender, and as a result of Harrison Petty going forward. Well, then they bring in Tomlinson on Friday night to play as that second key defender again. Frees up Jake Lever, and as a result, Jake Lever has one of the more impactful games of his season, and his ability to be able to help out Stephen May and actually be able to peel off his opponent and be able to help out and assist in those one-on-one contests. Only saw Charlie Curnow involved in 3 one-on-one contests for the night, so Stephen May wasn't isolated as much as what probably Carlton would have expected in that. And yes, Harry Mackay probably got a hold of Adam Tomlinson more than what probably many would have thought. But the big dog in terms of Charlie Curnow didn't get a hold of what Melbourne, as much as what Carlton would have actually wanted. So his role to be able to be the third key defender as opposed to the second key defender, I think is what Melbourne need to do moving forward. And I think you'll see their defensive profile even go a little bit better.
Right, if you're just joining us, Jordan Ngoe has been banned for 3 matches. That verdict has just come to hand there. So 3 games for Jordan Ngoe. Gerard and I think that is light. You can have your say on the Harcourt's open line, 1300 736 736. You mentioned just briefly Dan Houston, and he is entrenched inside the top 10 players according to Champion Data.
Yeah, I can't take my eyes off him anymore when I'm actually watching him play, just given our rating system rates him so highly. And just watching him on Saturday, I know people will say that it was against Hawthorn, but
it's not the only game he's dominated.
I think we've talked about him on this show probably 3 or 4 times from a coach's votes perspective, that he just does so much right, and that's what makes him the player that he is. He's so consistent and so rounded in all aspects of the game that you need to be for the position that he plays. So no defender has more inside 50s than what Houston does. He has the 4th most score involvements of any defender in the competition. So Nick Dacos and probably Jack Sinclair get a lot of praise for their ability to be able to play so aggressively as those halfback flankers. I think Port Adelaide now have him as their aggressive halfback flanker, that I think teams are going to need to actually spend a little bit of time negating the role that he does. He's a 12th best kick in the competition as well. So when he gets it, he's just such a penetrating and just really damaging kick with ball in hand as well. So,
good get by Jake Niall, who was the only one, I think, to put him in his All-Australian team.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what happens at the end of the year. But he's so important to what Port Adelaide have been able to do from a ball movement perspective. They're so damaging now through their ball movement game, and he's a key reason as to why they've been able to excel.
So you've got Jake Lever, Dan Houston, and we move on to the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah, so just want to talk about the Dogs and their offence at the moment. So I think a lot of the time we can get sucked into just looking at raw goals and behinds and assuming that a team has blown it, if you like. But that's actually not the case, and I think it's a little bit misleading. You need to actually dive into where they're actually generating their shots from. So yes, the Dogs have been inaccurate for most of the season, but even if they had have kicked to expectation based on the shots at goal that they've been generating, they're still averaging the 5th fewest points of any team in the competition. So this isn't purely just an accuracy issue. This is where they're actually generating their shots from and how many shots they're actually generating. So yes, I think it was 24, 25 shots on the weekend against Geelong. But so they're just not generating enough. And even when they are generating those shots, they're actually quite challenging. But what I just wanted to put on the radar is just some of these mids and some of these halfback flankers for the Dogs and their poor ball use going inside 50. So just having a look at their ability to be able to hit a target inside 50. So Bailey Smith is kicking 14% below expectation. So anytime you're sort of 5% or worse is alarm bells. Caleb Daniel, who has been one of the best kicks the competition's seen for years, is kicking 14% below expectation. And the other one's Bailey Dale. So this one's, I find this one really interesting. So when Bailey Dale exits the defensive 50, he's kicking 12% above expectation. But when he's kicking inside forward 50, he's kicking 8% below expectation. So that's a 20% swing in terms of his ability to be able to exit as opposed to going inside forward 50. So there's
a lot of those
exits
would come from kick-outs where he doesn't have frontal pressure on him, whereas when he's kicking it inside 50, congested not only inside 50 but also pressure on the ball carrier, which he doesn't have exiting D50. Would that be a reasonable...
no, that's a fair call. But this rating system takes into account how much pressure you're actually under and what type of kick you're actually trying to hit. So if you're trying to hit a person, 10 metres away under zero pressure, your expected hit rate is 100%. And if you hit that kick, well, you're an AFL average kick, if you like. So I think that's just something for the Dogs just to work on with their connection, going inside 50 as well. And then just from an accuracy perspective, Jamara's the one at the moment who's struggling the most of any Bulldogs player. So his shot at goal rating is actually 15% below where it actually should be, which makes him the second worst shot at goal in the competition so far this season. So that's killing him. And then if you just compare the pair, if you like, as a final point for the Dogs, so comparing Aaron Norton to Brodie Myercheck, so their expected accuracy at goals based on where they're having their shots at goal, their expected accuracy is both 55%. So they're having the same degree of difficulty with their shots at goal. Norton is going at 52% and Myercheck's going at 67%. So there's a 15% swing between the two key forwards of two of the contenders from the same degree of difficulty that they're actually having those shots at goal. So that's a significant concern for the Dogs.
Indeed it is. Very good insight into the Western Bulldogs. And we move now on to your thoughts on the Pies and the pressure on the Pies.
Yeah, just watching Collingwood again on Saturday and just watching them throughout the year. The hardest thing at the moment is being able to actually lay a glove on Collingwood. So they've actually received the third least amount of pressure of any team this year over the last 5 seasons. And only once have they received a pressure rating above the AFL average this year. And that was in the wet against Richmond in round 3.
And why is that?
Well, their ability to be able to just explode and get out of congestion quicker than the opposition. So then when they do chain out, they haven't got the opposition players hanging off them. So, players like Chris Pendlebury and De Goey. De Goey's the one that's just not receiving anywhere near the amount of pressure on his disposals that some of the best midfielders have this season. So, how you can lay a glove on them for the rest of the year is going to be a challenge for the opposition. And
you want to talk about the All-Australian key forwards?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation, I think, for yourself, Kane, and the selectors over the next period of time, working out who those who those positions actually belong to. And I would have thought Charlie Curnow and Jeremy Cameron are probably going to be considered, the most likely to fulfil those two key forward positions. But I just want to put a few other names on the table if we can. So based off our new rating system, these are the top 6 rated key forwards in the competition so far this year. So Charlie Curnow comes out at number 1 still. Lukosius now comes into 2nd. Jeremy Finlayson 3rd. Tom Hawkins 4th. Jeremy Cameron 5th. and Joe Danaher 6. So, if you have a look at, I talked about Joe Danaher before, a couple of weeks ago. After round 6, he was actually the 19th highest rated, key forward off this rating system. He's now up to number 6. Jeremy Cameron's gone from number 1 after round 6 to number 5, as I've said.
Is that because of inaccuracy?
Yep, inaccuracy and ball use across the ground. So he's still winning, a fair share of his ball, but his accuracy, and we've talked a lot about this, the rating system penalises inaccuracy and penalises poor ball use. That's the that's the area of his game that's actually really dropped away over the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So I just wonder if those two positions in terms of Curnow and actually Jeremy Cameron are actually locks, or whether they're actually up for discussion more so than probably what they were 4 or 5 weeks ago.
What do you think, Kane? You're a selector.
Well, I don't know if anyone's locked in. Is it impossible, as you know better than anyone, Gerard, to lock anyone in now?
I'm only thinking in your brain.
If it finished, if you were picking the team now, I think the 3 that you mentioned there'd be a very good debate, and maybe you pick all 3. I don't know. Maybe Danaher is the third tall when he can ruck. It sort of solves your second ruck option because he's very capable in that department. So, but then I love the season of Oscar Allen.
Where's Oscar on your ratings?
Well, he's right in the conversation. It has to be because what he's doing with little resources is phenomenal. And my check the season I've loved from him as well. So, Mitch Lewis is built after missing a significant portion of the season. Tough to make the team if you miss 4 or 5 weeks. I get that, but what he's doing with limited resources is excellent as well. So, look, there'll be fierce debate about that, Hoyne, and I think it's an excellent point that you made. Is anyone locked? Probably not, which is good.
I feel for you. It's the hardest. I feel one of the hardest jobs in the world. Picking an All-Australian team when there's probably 80 to 100 players that are actually, doing enough to actually warrant selection.
Well, you've certainly helped Dan Houston's case, without question. Essendon's profile, Hoyne, you've got some thoughts.
Yeah, so I just want to put this on the radar. So they are defending better, for the most part over the last, 3 or 4 week period. Second hardest team to actually score against when you go inside 50, giving up the 4th fewest points of any team in the competition. And importantly, over the last 3 weeks, they've gone from being the easiest team to move the ball against from one end of the ground to the other to the 8th hardest to move the ball against from one end of the ground to the other. And yes, they have played some weaker opposition in that time, but that defensive profile has improved. What I do want to put on watch is how they're actually making this happen. So 142, 116 and 104 uncontested marks 3 weeks in a row has helped that defensive profile, if you like. I think when your defensive profile has been assisted through your ability to rely on the uncontested mark game, a few red flags there for me. So we haven't really seen the uncontested marking game sort of have the success other than West Coast in 2018 that probably some have been able to generate over the last 7 or 8 years. Only one Premier has ranked top 4 in the last 7 years for uncontested marks.
Did you have a flag on the Swans because of that last year?
Yeah, so the Swans weren't as high. They weren't. Yeah, so they weren't top 4, top 5. They did play a different brand to what some other teams did. But you just think back to what Collingwood are doing at the moment. So they're 11th for uncontested marks. Melbourne are 17th for uncontested marks. Port are 18th for uncontested marks, and their ability to be able to hold up and defend really well for the majority, puts them in good stead. And the reason why I just put it as a red flag is that, if you fast forward to semi-final, prelim, grand final day, the chances of you being able to get the game on your terms and play that uncontested mark style, are probably
limited.
Correct. So we haven't seen Melbourne or Richmond really do that over the last few years. So yes, they have improved, but it is just a little watch for me.
Okie doke. Before we get to the world famous "Who Did They Miss" segment, on behalf of the dozen or so Geelong supporters that have texted in, they would ask you, Hoyne, or as somebody called you, Data Man, where do you sit now on the Cats after you wrote them off last week?
I'm still not jumping back on in terms of them being a premiership contender just yet. Their profile at the moment, especially defensively, is a fair way off where it needs to be to contend based off what's happened over previous years.
Okay, Cats fans, there it is.
There's the answer, and I like it. Stick to your guns. Who did the coaches miss?
Yeah, so we'll go back to Friday night. So Jacob Van Ruin, so we had him as the 4th highest rated player on the ground on Friday night, didn't get a vote from the coaches, and it was his ability to be able to win the ball and be able to impact it from a contested possession point of view. So 16 disposals is a good return for a key forward, and
it's a lot of possession.
Yeah. So and then he was involved in the 6 score involvements as well. So he's actually having a really good year, performing 16% above expectation for his position and age so far this year.
Petrarca got 10, May got 8, back in form. Lever got 5, back in form as you said. Langdon back in form with 4. Harry got 2. Wiedering got 1. Yep, I reckon Van Rooyen missed out.
Yeah, and then we moved to Saturday and Todd Marshall. So Todd Marshall's game was the 3rd highest rated player on the ground. He actually got 0 votes from the coaches. Yeah, I was surprised by that, wasn't I? Yeah. He was the 3rd highest rated key forward across the whole round. So to take 7 marks inside 50, to be involved in 11 scores, to kick 5 goals, I was actually pretty surprised that he didn't get a vote.
So the reverse curse is now looking at its 10th win. Do you think it will be stopped by the Dogs, or do you think it will go on indefinitely?
No, I think based on what both teams have done so far, I'll be going Port Adelaide at the moment. So, that's where I'll be going down that path. Then we move. So this is an interesting one. So this is from the same game, and these are direct opponents. Mm-hmm. So Kieran Briggs was the 2nd highest rated player on the ground on the weekend. He's actually had a really good 3 weeks, actually. He's actually performing eight rating points above expectation so far.
He's certainly taken over the number 1 mantle, isn't he?
Yeah, 4 goals in 3 weeks as a ruckman, 17 tackles in 3 weeks as a ruckman. It's actually pretty impressive. But he didn't get a vote. And then his direct opponent in Toby Nankervis was actually the highest rated player on the ground on the weekend. And I just wanted to give Toby a bit of a shout out. He didn't get a vote from the coaches, but that was the best defensive game we've seen by a ruckman in 3 years. 2 years. The best defensive game that we've seen. So he's pressure this year on the opposition, which he's the 14th best pressure player in the competition. So just to put that into context, you're usually seeing midfielders or the half-forward flankers rating high up for pressure. So for him to be the 14th best pressure player in the comp is a fantastic.
Well, his centre clearance mongrel scrubber off the ground in the last quarter just about won them the game.
Yeah, just love what he's doing at the moment. And then the final one is Cam Zurhaar. So Zurhaar in the twilight game, 3rd highest rated player on the ground, the highest rated player for North Melbourne. 4 goals, 9 score involvements. His ball use was superb. And as we keep talking about, accuracy is going to reward you in this rating system. So 4 goals and 4 really crucial and challenging goals.
Well, they're the players that the coaches missed.